morning, and the rest of us have arrived. So we will go ahead and turn the floor over to you this morning, John.
Thank you. Welcome to our fiscal year 2027 budget retreat. This is your peek at scheduled budget work sessions for fiscal year 2027. We are here today for our budget retreat. We will return in January for a work session focused on our capital improvement planning. In late March, we will have the first of 3 budget work sessions, with 2 in April. On our way to a recommended budget in May, at the first regularly scheduled meeting, hold a public hearing at the second meeting in May, and budget adoption on June 2nd. Thank you. So today's agenda looks short, but it does pack a punch. We will begin with a quick look back at fiscal year 2025. We will then look at our current year budget by function. Afterwards, we'll begin discussion of planning for fiscal year 2027. We have several folks here to talk about future considerations for fiscal year 2027. Our Strategic Partnerships Director, Rachel Sawyer, will share some historic perspective on the community investments we've made to further the goals of our strategic plan. And then we will be joined by our new Recovery Officer, Kevin Madsen, to discuss how recovery impacts our work, and our Emergency Services Director, Taylor Jones, on how our preparedness plan dovetails with budget planning. David Sweat, our Health and Human Services Director, will provide some information on impacts we are seeing from federal government activity. And then Strategy and Innovation Director, Rafael Baptista, will give us an update on the work being done to improve service delivery in our fire districts. Then we'll wrap up. We're going to begin with a look back at fiscal year 2025. When we talked in August, I discussed that intergovernmental revenue had come in much higher than expected, at about $3.4 million in disaster-related funding. As the year wound down, we saw a 17% increase in registered motor vehicle property tax collections, which usually only sees about a 5 to 6% jump year over year. Ambulance revenue spiked the last quarter of the year, and investment earnings came in over budget as the market seems to perform independent of inflation or other concerns. This resulted in about $5.2 million more revenue than last projected, but as a reminder, property tax and sales tax were still more than $4 million under budget. On the expenditure side, we instituted a $17 million reduction plan and achieved that plan. We actually spent about $1.7 million less as departments did not spend all of their operating budgets. In August, we projected a potential use of $5.9 million of fund balance, but given the drivers we just discussed, we have a small surplus and are returning $1.6 million to fund balance. This still leaves us shy of our 15% minimum available fund balance per policy. We'll be discussing fund balance in more detail a little later this morning. Are there questions regarding fiscal year 2025?
Okay, John, I just want to make sure. You said that with the 5.2 million increase there, but the sales tax and property tax was still down.
Yes.
And how much did you say that was still down?
About $4 million.
About $4 million down. Okay. But these other drivers were up, and that was...
Yes.
Okay.
So the registered motor vehicle, the RMV property tax was about $1.2 million more than we expected. Ambulance revenue was about $1.8 million more than we expected. And we had lost some ambulance revenue during the storm when we had other providers come in, but our ambulance revenue did spike at the end of the year. And then investment earnings came in $1 million over what we expected.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions? All right. Now I'd like to talk a bit about budgeting and our current year budget. The Local Government Budget and Fiscal Control Act and North Carolina General Statute, Chapter 159, speaks to a balanced budget as the sum of estimated net revenues and appropriate fund balances is equal to appropriations. Or simply put, expenditures equal revenue. Our budget philosophy is structural balance, meaning that we expect to use recurring revenues for recurring expenses and one-time revenues for one-time expenditures. The fiscal year 2026 adopted budget was structurally balanced in that there was no appropriation of fund balance and revenues equaled expenditures. As a reminder, property tax is our largest revenue stream and really is the only lever to increase revenue by setting a tax rate. Property taxes are budgeted at $287.2 million, making up 66% of general fund revenue. Sales tax is our second largest unrestricted revenue, composing 11% of the revenue and budgeted at $49.6 million. Intergovernmental revenue is budgeted at $49.6 million. However, it is largely restricted to certain purposes. Sales and services are largely services provided by public health and emergency medical services, tax collection agreements, and rental income, and are budgeted at $23.9 million. 5% of the revenue budget. Permits and fees are those fees collected for statutory work provided. This revenue stream is also restricted to the provision of that service largely, specifically with permits and fees. Other taxes and licenses are 1% of the revenue budget at $6.2 million and made up of deed excise tax, heavy equipment rental car, gross receipts, and video programming services. Interfund transfers are about 1%, the largest portion of this being a $5 million transfer of Article 46 sales tax to support AV Tech's operating. Other revenues include investment earnings, indirect cost recovery, and sale of assets. Are there questions about revenues in this year's budget? Okay. I'm now going to speak to expenditures. We budget at the functional level in the general fund, which is our largest annual fund. Multi-year funds budget at the project or grant level, which you often see in budget amendments brought to you for capital projects, special projects, or grants. The general fund budgets by function. So what does that mean? We have 8 functional areas. One of our functional areas is debt, which is solely our debt payments for debt-funded capital projects and vehicles, totaling about 4% of the general fund at $18.3 million. We'll hear more about debt from our finance team later this morning. I'm going to speak in detail about each of the remaining functions. Education is the largest function by budget at $125.9 million, 29% of the general fund. The majority of this funding, about $117 million, funds the local current expense for operating of our 2 public school K-12 systems, Buncombe County Schools and Nashville City Schools. Almost $8.4 million is budgeted for operating for AV Tech, $5 million of which is transferred from Article 46 funding. The remainder of $239,000 is education support contracts that support the Irwin Career Academy, Kayla intern program, and special projects for the 2 school systems. While that is support from the general fund, the school systems receive an additional estimated $48.2 million for capital projects through sales tax this year. 50% of the Article 39 sales tax per local statute goes to the School Capital Fund Commission. Article 46 sales tax supports AV Tech capital projects and provides $15.1 million of funding this year for that purpose. The Asheville City Schools Supplemental District Tax generates an additional $16.5 million for funding that school system. These 4 streams of sales tax and the taxing district bring in another $79.8 million to these education entities, meaning over $200 million in local tax funding for education. Are there any questions about education?
So on, John, on that one, just to be clear, the 29% that you're showing on the graph is not including these additional funds you just talked
It
about?
is not.
That's
just the portion, the $125.9 million portion of the general fund.
out of the general fund. And then I know sometimes when Melissa does our finance report, she shows, or within that report, there's like the net county cost of the different functions, cost centers as well. And I find that always useful to look at too, so that might be something that you can share with us.
We can show that. I'll talk a little bit, I'm going to talk a little about offsetting revenue in one of the other functions. There is an offsetting revenue being brought in by the education function. So that $125.9 million is all county cost. So if we talk about county costs that way, that's subsidized by the county there.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions about education? Public safety is the second largest function by budget, coming in at $98.3 million, or 23%. This function is inclusive of 6 departments, to include the sheriff's office with the detention center, emergency services with the public safety training center, our 911 operations, justice services, the identification bureau, and our public safety communications systems. One caveat in the slide and the next several functions is the total of salaries and benefits. You will see that this total does not equal all of the departments, as the total reflects a reduction for expected lapse, which in this case is about $1,032,000 excluding the sheriff.
Can you elaborate on that, please?
So when you look at the figures for salary and benefits, that total is not $81.9 million. That total would be about $1 million more than that. But we didn't budget that because we're accounting for lapse, so that when we we don't budget 100% of salaries. So the sheriff, we budget the sheriff's lapse in his budget separately. So the $1 million reduction here is for the other 5 departments, and the sheriff has a lapse pulled out of his budget specifically. Question?
Why do we do that differently for the sheriff? Unless I misunderstood.
We do it differently for the sheriff because we give the sheriff his departmental budget, and the Sheriff's Association advocates strongly that we can't budget them to the line level, so that once they get their departmental allocation, that they can do what they need to do with it. So we build that into his budget so that it's already clear to him.
Thank you, John. That makes sense.
Thanks for breaking it out like this too, to where we see the different departments and the salaries and the operating. This is helpful to see it broken out this way.
The public safety function is largely personnel driven. You see that reflected by the investment in salaries. The operating budgets here total roughly $16 million, and there's with almost $400,000 of capital outlay for EMS equipment. Not included here is, in the general fund, is the 911 fund. That's state funding to provide public safety communications infrastructure. That's about $1.6 million, as well as capital project funding of EMS spaces, ambulances, and our $10 million PSIP project. Any questions about public safety?
John, is that $395,000 line item, is that a debt payment? And I guess my second question is, why is there nothing listed under it? Is there just simply no other capital expenditures for those other
There's no
divisions?
capital outlay in the general fund for those departments other than emergency services. So our. It's not debt. That's purchasing EMS equipment, things that they need to put on trucks to get to deliver ambulance services. And since that's a part of the ambulance, it's considered a capital outlay because the ambulance itself is a capital, it's a capital equipment. So we're investing in building out the ambulance. So that's why it's called capital outlay. All our capital projects are budgeted in the capital projects fund. And the debt I showed before, all of the debt for the capital projects, the debt payments this year are $18.3 million in the debt function of the general fund.
You said 18.3?
Yes.
It's on the sheet.
Okay.
And that should be on this couple slides before that on your slide. All right, are we good? Next is human services. This function is inclusive of the whole of health and human services and is divided by our cost centers. This function is budgeted at $96.4 million, or 22% of the general fund, and is offset by $40.8 million in intergovernmental revenue. So about 58% of this function is county cost. Salaries support the administration of these services, while more programmatic funding is provided in direct assistance to clients such as crisis intervention, foster care board payments, adoption assistance, and other emergency assistance. Animal services are contracted out, as is behavioral health with funding to VIA. Does this make sense? Okay. General government is the function that supports the most departments, 18 of them specifically. This function totals $66.3 million, or 15% of the general fund. These are the departments that support our front-facing activities, such as the county manager's office, CAPE, human resources, budget, and finance. Our general services and fleet department supports maintenance and repair of all county facilities, as well as maintenance of our grounds through staff as well as contracting. Vehicles for the county are purchased and budgeted by fleet. Here you see $957,000 budgeted for purchase of sheriff's vehicles this year in capital outlay. Also included in fleet's budget is all our auto maintenance, parts and repairs, as well as lease costs for leased vehicles. The largest department budget in this function is information technology. IT staff are generally highly specialized, and this operating budget supports all hardware and software for the organization. This includes overarching software needs such as our enterprise resource planning software Workday, as well as the suite of Microsoft products used for documents, spreadsheets, and presentations. Body cams and dash cams for the sheriff's office are budgeted here given the technological nature of these products. Additionally, connectivity and security are important tasks of the IT department and help maintain safe operations. Many departments require department-specific software to meet their needs as well. As for hardware, computers, phones, tablets, and printers are handled here for over 1,800 staff. Also included are property assessment and tax collections. The two departments responsible for ensuring we assess values and collect our property tax revenue. The revaluation is supported by the Reappraisal Reserve Fund, which is funded by PAYGO transfers annually. The governing body budget is included here as well. Are there questions about general government?
I have one question, just wrapping my mind around the Sheriff's Association in the previous slide being separate, but then for this slide being, I guess, for vehicle purposes. Can you explain to me what our plan is or how we process those two things?
So the sheriff's department budget is his department at the line level.
Right.
So what's allocated to him? So this method ensures that we're purchasing cars because we may not purchase sheriff's vehicles separately. We may purchase vehicles together, and it puts fleet management in one place. And then with the body cams and dash cams, there's a highly specialized IT nature to that, and they manage that contract.
Well, it makes sense to me that we'd budget them together, right? Buying them
Yes.
in bulk is probably better, but the sheriff presumably would come to us for those vehicle needs. And
Yes,
That's
he makes
something we have.
vehicle requests with every other department, so.
I'll interject here that the sheriff does control that. The buy-in part comes from the fleet services because they can do, to your point, the bulk buy-in. They can work with the contractor and make sure the vehicles are ordered on time. So the actual technical work of it is done by the fleet staff, but the sheriff's office, they're the ones that control the type of vehicles, what they need, what goes in that vehicle and stuff like that.
thank you.
Just so I'm clear, so within these budgets, all the vehicles are actually included under our general services and fleet,
Yes,
correct? So like the sheriff's, what we're seeing here, under the sheriff's office and detention center, that does not include the vehicles, that is,
Or
Out of-
his body cams.
Yeah.
and
or the
dash
body cams, all of that is additional that's coming out.
yes,
of the
that's
fleet.
additional support that general government is providing to the sheriff's office.
Okay, thank you.
All the softwares, IT equipment, all that stuff is budgeted in IT as well.
Okay.
Okay, if we're ready to move on. The cultural and recreational function is 3% of the general fund, $12.1 million. The library staffs 12 locations with programming as well as a variety of online programming. Our Parks and Recreation Department supports the operation of 15 parks, contracts for pool operations, and provides recreation programming. Are there questions about cultural and recreational function? Okay. Economic and physical development function is 2% of the general fund, and totals $10.8 million, and supports 4 departments to include the economic development department. That budget is largely contracts for furthering economic development. $1 million of this funding was to NCDOT for the collaboration on the Anka Commerce Road. Permits and inspections is the only department in the organization that is fully funded by the revenue it receives. Additionally, we have the planning department as well as agricultural and land resources, which includes a contract for cooperative extension services with NC State University. Questions?
When you said includes the contract with NC State, so the portion that the county pays, is that what you're talking about for the ag extension agents?
Yes, and that would be in the operating there as opposed to personnel because it's a contract.
Okay, thanks for clarifying. Okay.
Other financing sources are generally interfund transfers to other funds. In this case, includes 3 transfers to the Special Projects Fund for early childhood, economic development incentives, and conservation easements. Other transfers are to the Reappraisal Reserve Fund and a transfer to the Transportation Fund to support those activities. Do we have any questions about functional budgeting and this year's budget?
Commissioners, as John mentioned, we budget by the function level. So what you would typically see was that top line of the function, but we want to do a little bit deeper dive so you understand what's included in those functions. When we bring the budget amendment to you later this year, the budget ordinance to you, I guess that will be in May or June, you would only see those top line numbers. So wanted to dig in a little bit deeper so you understand what's included in those expenditures and the line items in broad details.
Thank you, that's helpful.
Yeah, thank you for breaking it down. I think that addresses a lot of questions we had through the last cycle.
Okay.
John, I wish we'd had you at the bank years ago. Thanks. This was a good presentation, and I liked the way you broke it down. And it even made it easier for thick heads like me to understand. No problem.
Thank you, sir. So we're going to move on to talking about fiscal year 27 budget considerations. We're going to discuss in detail some considerations as we move forward in fiscal year 27 budget planning. By no means are these all the considerations in planning, but some of the items we see that require some attention as we move forward. During the portion of our programming, Jason Rogers, our Assistant Director of Permits and Inspections, will talk about the code enforcement team. Joseph Guzman from Parks and Recreation will discuss Beaver View Mountain Planning. And our Security Officer, Billy Looper, will discuss safety and physical security. We'll briefly touch on vehicle replacement plans and professional development. Then we will have some fiscal discussion to include fund balance review, funding post-employment benefits, and debt service impacts from our CFO and her finance team. So I'm going to bring Jason Rogers up to us to talk about the code enforcement team. Press the down button to advance your slide. Thank you. Good morning.
So I'm here today to talk about the code enforcement team. It's obviously been a big issue over the last while. Oh, I'm sorry, I had too many. It was created in 2022 to bring multiple departments into a group to be able to discuss many different facets of what we do as far as enforcement pieces, and they work together and link together to collaborate on these properties. The membership is in the planning, building inspection, solid waste, environmental health, air quality, fire marshal's office, and legal. But we also have other county departments that support us with social services, the sheriff's office, the homelessness program manager, and other folks that we may feel can collaborate with us to help us resolve issues. From 2022, we've logged about 2,200 complaints between the departments, and of those 2,200, there's 117 code enforcement cases. These encompass about 3 to 4 of those complaints each. So it's about 350, 400 of those complaints that are multifaceted per project area, per site that we deal with and try to work through. And then, there's a lot of reoccurring issues with these. We coordinate a lot with other state agencies and people like that maybe could aid us, NCDQ, NC, DOT, different places like that to try to resolve some of these issues. The challenges of this is that these are multifunctional, highly complex issues. For resolution, it takes a lot of effort and a lot of attention from many different departments to get through them. They're frequented and high-touch properties, very focused properties that are into an extreme level of problem. A lot of them require the court system and a lot of legal involvement with the legal office. Whether it's simple as sending letters or actually going to court and getting court orders to try to resolve the issues. And then there's new challenges with, Tropical Storm Helene and the focus areas of a lot of damaged buildings and different things that have come from the tropical storm. And then there's a challenge of now we're finding that properties, if you don't stay focused and frequently touch them, they fall back into complex issues. They may get resolved, but they find themselves moving back into it. And we have to go back, reoccurring issues. From there, the evaluation completed a comprehensive review of the processes and a full execution of updated standard operating procedures. This portion includes also using our computer system, Excel, to label out different pieces of, where there may be security issues, maybe there's animal issues, so forth and so on. And it puts all of our information into a singular process as well as a standard operating procedure to categorize these properties as, what the dangers may be or the complexities of them, so that all these departments are linked together as we operate through this. The review resulted in several initiatives and opportunities to expand what we do. We've expanded a focus into master complaints and how to really focus down on these heavier, large, problematic areas. This future budget will require a more focused staff and staff to help keep everyone on track with this. And the bigger piece is funding to address the rising needs as these products become into the legal system. The courts allow us certain ways to clean up properties, but then it takes funding to be able to do so. So that's some of the stuff that you'll see in the budget coming up. Any questions?
Well, I'll just share that thank you so much for your work on this. I know it's extremely challenging and has become more so, certainly. And so I'm definitely supportive of us figuring out a way to make sure there's some staff dedicated to working on this, because the reality is I think it's too hard when you're spread out doing your other jobs, and the only way to move forward on some of these is to have dedicated staff who can manage these very complex projects. And so then the funding that we can actually then follow through on what we say we're going to do. So thank you for bringing this to us, and I look forward to hearing more about kind of the plans to move forward with this as well.
Thank you, Jason.
Thank you.
Then we have Joseph Guzman from Parks and Recreation. Joseph was tapped at the last minute. Emergency.
Yes. But I'm Joseph Guzman. I'm the project manager for Parks and Rec. Thanks for having me. This is a very exciting project. I'm sure you guys know a lot about it already. So, yeah. Up, down, man. So first, I kind of want to start with where we're at right now as a county with our Parks Department. We are currently at 584.36 acres, with our largest park being 320 acres at Lake Julian Park. You can see the staff that park needs, and we'll touch on that later with Deep Review Mountain possibly coming online. Deep Review Mountain is 342 acres, and it will increase the total park acreage to 58.55 to a total of 926.51 acres. It's a beautiful mountain. I know a lot of you have been up there. It's such a great opportunity working with Southern Appalachian to help conserve this plot of land, and we look forward to see how we can partner getting this online. So next, I kind of want to touch about where Deep Review Mountain is. It is very close to all of Asheville and the surrounding community. Also, most importantly, it is right near Deep Review Community, which is an underserved community within Buncombe County. Having this park come online will help provide recreational opportunities to that community right in their backyard. And I think that's something as a department we really want to focus on, is how can we provide accessibility to Deep Review Mountain to that community. So we did our research by reaching out to several different state organizations, including the state park system. We looked at how they're doing Pisgah View State Park Master Plan right now. And then also we reached out to Chestnut Mountain Park, which is down the road in Canton, and kind of asked how did they get these large plots of open space online to the public. Something we really noticed was staffing requirements. We also noticed operational costs and then the volunteer engagement of a lot of these plots. We also noticed that collaborating with professional organizations is a key to this project. So, talking to what we all want to talk about today, budget. So the next 5 years, we plan to space this out. We don't plan to ask for everything at once. This is going to require a lot of staff. For one, it's going to require parks operational staff. These are your day-to-day people that can empty the trash cans, clean the restrooms, keep the park safe by patrolling, make people see employees within the park when they're there hiking and about. And then also we're asking for a landscaping and trail crew. Now, we will rely a lot on volunteer help for these trails, but this trail crew will be crucial to help guide those volunteers and also fill in the gaps in between. We all know we have lots of forest land, we have lots of Park Service land, so these volunteer organizations can be stretched thin at times. Next, I'm going to talk on how we plan to phase the development of the park. We do plan to do a phased approach year over year. Our first phase is very crucial as I go into the timeline in the next slide. We will want to see how can we get it online safely, quickly, but also not by taking anything away from the safety of the community and other things by taking, we want D Review to be a landmark destination park. So we don't want to rush this thing. So in this first phase, we're going to be doing access studies, looking at the road that's currently there. We're going to be doing a master plan for the park, looking at how we can expand the trails. That will also be looking at what resources do we need, bathroom facilities, storage facilities for maintenance workers, and then also needs of the community, what they really want to see within the park. So even though it might take longer than we hope to get to an open park, we're going to do the phased approach so we can really understand how we can make this an amazing park. Also, operational funds. It is important to note that it is a conservation easement. So part of this agreement is we have to make sure that we are doing everything within the guidelines of that easement. Also, tree and forestry management. After Helene, the Parks Department hired a company to do a tree risk assessment in every one of our parks. We all saw how many trees came down during Helene. So we want to make sure that the trails are safe to the public by doing an assessment early on within this project. So then finally, I have the timeline here. So we are planning acquisition of Beaver View Mountain in March 2026, and then the planning process would take 8 to 12 months, getting us to construction in December 2026, and then opening the park in December 2028, worst case April 2029. And then if you see the note at the bottom, as I touched on earlier, we will be exploring options of how we can do a phased opening, but we want to work with a firm that we hire early on to tell us how we can do that in a safe manner to the community. So yeah, any questions?
Well, I appreciate all this information. As you know, our community is very excited, so I'm glad that you're looking at a phased opening, because I know people are chomping at the bit to get out there and enjoy this. And it's about physical health, but it's also about mental health for our community. Like, people just share so often how being able to get out and have these opportunities that are close by in our community are very beneficial. And as far as the volunteers, yeah, I've certainly been hearing from folks. I think it was the Carolina Mountain Club. I'm sure you've spoken with. Seems like they're definitely interested in helping with trail maintenance, and they have a lot of experience as
Yes, yes. We're excited to have the volunteer organizations get involved on this as well. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yep, thank you.
Bring up Billy Looper.
Good morning. Good morning. Commissioners, my name is Billy Looper. I'm the Public Safety Training and Security Manager. I want to talk to you about physical security. In FY23, they began the process, Buncombe County began the process to centralize all the physical security elements and put that under the job that I now have. This is a quick overview of what we have at the county and what we're responsible for as far as physical security. We talk about physical security. The main components of that are access control, video surveillance, and protection of critical infrastructure. And you all are critical infrastructure. Critical infrastructure extends to things like our roads infrastructure, our communication systems, and our county government, not only county management, but county government as well. So you are considered, we have a big congregation of critical infrastructure right here, right now. Some of it was in place when I got here, and that would have been some of the video cameras. There was also an amount of money that had been set aside in IT to do assessments for video cameras, and we were out of 60-something requests, we were able to fund about half of those. The rest are at the county parks, and I'll get to that in just a moment. But also the access control, we've done the new security badge project. So we're in the weeds with it every day. One of the problems we have is it's just me right now. And, and because of that, I'm only able to be in a reactive position. It's been very well received through all the departments throughout the county, and we're able to help with a lot of employee training as well. And that's been well received. And the more that we're able to do, the more we're asked to do as far as doing assessments and things like that. Security assessments and threat assessments is something that we do on a regular basis. I wish we could devote more time to it, and hopefully if we have a funded security budget, we will be able to do that. As of right now, we do not have a funded or a dedicated security budget. It comes from each department. If one department has some security needs and we do an assessment and we make recommendations based on that assessment, it depends on how much funding that specific department has. Some of the smaller departments, it hurts them a lot more than it would a bigger department. And with a dedicated security budget, we'll be able to kind of prioritize those needs. And a rising tide lifts all ships. We'll be able to help smaller departments as much as we are the larger departments as well. Also, we don't have any full-time management of this security program, and the physical security assessments and the equipment and the folks that we have in place. And we don't have any kind of plan other than being reactive to what we're asked to do right now. And that's some of the challenges that we've met. In addition to those challenges, the sheriff in June the 6th of last year pulled his deputies out of the county buildings because he needed them in other positions. And as a result of that, we took those funds and we have contract security on several sites now, HHS, tax, and the libraries. And we also, the HRC, we've got one in place there now. But that is coming from funds within those departments. And we are working with the sheriff's office. The sheriff is been really great to us, and he understands what we're trying to do, and we're trying to help them as well. And they can't do everything, but they do a great job, and they support us very much.
I have a quick question.
Yes, ma'am.
While we're on this, and you said that this security is coming from those departments' budgets. Is that already budgeted in, or are they having to utilize other budgeted funds within their function to pay for this?
We were subsidizing the salaries in those departments of those deputies.
Of the deputies?
So we took, since those positions were vacated, we utilized the funding that we would have used for deputies at this point. So we've absorbed this cost this year.
Just this year?
Yes.
Okay.
So just so I understand, so we were paying for those deputies out of our general funds.
Correct.
So we were paying for that, but they were pulled.
Yes.
And so now we're contracting for,
Using the money that we would have used for salaries.
okay,
Just for this year, so.
just for this year.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you for letting us interrupt you before we
Oh,
got
no,
too far
absolutely.
down your presentation. Thank you.
And sometimes, one thing I think about a lot when I come inside this building is we had a deputy dedicated here at one time. And we're not able to have that right now. And that just makes me cringe, just because this is county government right now. This is the most critical infrastructure we have with what we do. And this gives us an opportunity to put some folks in place, some contract folks in place who can do more than we can do right now. There's no one sitting at the desk out there right now that could call 911 if there was a problem. And that's, people are able to get on the elevator and go where they need. We've been able to put some access control in place upstairs in some places, but we're not where we need to be yet. But we're on our way. And management and our department have been very supportive of what we're doing. And this is just a natural progression of what's been going on since security enhancements have been implemented, and we're growing on that as we go. We're not trying to take the place of law enforcement by any means. I was in law enforcement for 35 years, very successful career, very thankful for it, but this is what we're doing, and we're trying to protect human assets, tangible property, and critical infrastructure, and then build on that as we go. And with that, we want to put a strategic plan in place as we move forward and put a replacement plan in place for our equipment and our security cameras. When I came here, we had $140,000 that had already been dedicated into IT for security cameras, and we went through that pretty quick, but there's no replacement plan in place now. So, and if we have a failure or something like that, that money's going to have to come out of that specific department. So anyway, but we'll keep doing those assessments. Also, just want to touch on the county parks, and you heard what kind of need you're going to have. Alice and I have been in touch about trying to expand that to the county parks as we can get there over the next 3 to 5 years. And we're going to be going in the direction of some AI and some predictive analysis and some behavioral analysis type things. And we're working really well with HHS and those folks over there, because that seems to be where we have a lot of our problems at. But any questions that I can answer?
The last bullet on the slide, Billy, we are working with the sheriff's office, including the courthouse as one of our facilities, so.
Yes, we are. We're in touch with the sheriff and his folks, and we're trying to help them accomplish what their needs are as much, and it's a great relationship, it really is.
Okay, I'm going to talk briefly about vehicle replacements. Over the past few budget cycles, many vehicle replacements have been deferred due to fiscal constraints and lack of vehicle availability stemming from supply chain shortages. These have extended the service life of many county vehicles beyond what we would call optimal. The county uses a criteria for replacement based on a combination of age, mileage, and cost of maintenance. Based on this criteria, 162 of approximately 500 vehicles in our fleet will need replacement over the next 5 years. The projected cost for these replacements, including all required upfitting, is approximately $13 million. This is the cost for replacement of existing vehicles not damaged by Helene, nor any additions for additional staff or other needs. Replacements will align with the sustainable fleet policy, prioritizing hybrid, electric, and alternative fuel options where feasible to reduce operating costs and emissions. We will bring you more detail on vehicles at our capital planning work session in January. Any questions?
John, sorry.
Yes.
So you said a third of our county vehicles. Is there a total number of county vehicles that we have?
500.
500. And
A little over half of that is the sheriff's vehicles.
And do we currently have vehicles that are outside of our criteria for replacement that are still in service?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that has happened because, I mean, for several years, the supply chain issues were such that it would take over a year and a half to get some vehicles replaced. But also the last couple of years there's been some budgetary constraints in replacing the number of vehicles we would like to replace in a given year.
So within that third, are vehicles that are currently out of criteria within that, or is that an additional number of vehicles that are now needing replacement? That question makes sense.
So we've built out 5 years using the criteria, and we think we'll need to replace about a third of them over the next 5 years. Looking at it right now, we are exploring our data right now because we did just move to a new fleet management software system after one that was about 20 years old. So some of our data is not where we would like it to be in terms of like how much we've spent on vehicles and specific vehicles and such. So we're also working with the data, so these numbers may be refined.
Okay. And then we don't need this now, but at some point I'd be curious what our decommission process is for vehicles. Do we sell those back in the marketplace? Do we find are we able to pull in some revenue from releasing those vehicles?
We we do sell some vehicles if they're able to be sold, and we've done some of that. And we lost quite a few vehicles during the storm that were actually set aside for resale. So, as well as vehicles, and we're still working through vehicle replacement for the Helene vehicles because there are the complicating layers of getting the insurance proceeds back before we can approach FEMA. So even though we're now over a year removed from the storm, we're still working on replacing vehicles lost in the storm.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
John, the question I have, on not counting the third vehicles that we replace, what about the vehicles that we wreck annually? You know, that are in accidents or whatever. Are we self-insured for those, or are they covered by insurance? How does that work?
We are self-insured. If we're not the folks at fault, if it's someone else at fault, we can collect insurance from the other party. With the costs involved in some of our vehicles, oftentimes the other insurance doesn't get there, and the fully loaded cost of a sheriff's vehicle is almost $80,000 per vehicle. And then ambulances, if someone hits an ambulance, it's not going to cover the cost of so we do have to cover some of those costs for replacement. Our insurance and risk folks are looking into different insurance options in the coming year to see if we can get more comprehensive coverage.
John, before you move on, I do want to introduce, we did hire a fleet manager that is dedicated to fleet. He's just not a lead mechanic no more. And I do want to introduce, he's in the room. So Jake, if you'll stand. Jake is our new fleet manager, and he's who's helping us guide this process to make sure that we have a good replacement process, our software system is tracking the right data, and we can get better at our fleet management. So I just want to say, Jake, he's got big shoulders because he's got a big job. We have over 500 vehicles that he's managing, so I want to just introduce him to the team. Thanks.
We're very excited to have him.
And then one other question, again, it can be a future discussion, but I'd be curious, our vehicle maintenance, if that's in-house, if we contract that out?
It's in-house.
It's in-house, okay, so we do have a facility. And then the other thing I'll just note as we think about budgeting, I'm grateful that our sustainability fleet policy is encouraging us to move towards more hybrid and electric. While that sticker price may be more upfront, the life of the vehicle maintenance is much, much lower on hybrid and electric vehicles. So I think long-term, that'll save us funding on vehicle maintenance.
I've got a quick question on that regard. I know that the county has a variety of electric vehicle charging infrastructure in place in various places and buildings. Is that budget expenditure, does that fit within the vehicle replacement budget, or where do those dollars sit within?
Those are capital expenses.
Okay.
So the capital infrastructure for our 2 parking garages, we've had to upgrade the electrical to accommodate that, and those are planned. I believe we're working through one of the garages now, and the other garage is a future placeholder.
Okay. I'm sure that's a bit of a chicken or egg problem for Jeremiah or whoever kind of handles this, in the sense that I guess we have to wait to procure the vehicles before we know if we need to then plan for a capital expenditure for EV chargers. Is there, I guess, is that being, I guess, thought through ahead of time, or?
We're considering all the options, and like I said, Commissioner Sloan, we're going to come back to you in more detail in January at our capital focus work session. We'll talk a bit about the sustainable fleet policy and using that policy to guide our work. And like I said, like the county manager said, we have a new fleet manager on board, so once we start getting our hands around this, we're going to bring you more information for discussion in January.
That's great. Thank you.
And Commissioner Sloan, to your quick question, yes, we have been working on the infrastructure part because we know we have to have that in place even before we get the vehicles. So on county property, not just for the public, but for county vehicles, we have been looking at infrastructure to serve the county vehicles that we're buying through this fleet facility, sustainability fleet policy as well. So on county property at different locations, we have installed EV just for county vehicles.
Okay. Great.
Professional development has been one of the areas that we have invested less in due to budgetary constraints over the last few years. This is one of the more cost-effective methods of building capacity, and the investment staff this way builds morale and has been shown to reduce turnover. Moreover, there are trainings that staff are required to complete for many positions across the organization before they can even begin their work, such as code enforcement officers or social workers, or they need to maintain a certification to continue doing professional work, and that includes our clinicians and attorneys. And this is an area that will need to be addressed in our budget planning this year. So I just wanted to bring this up to the top. I'm going to invite our finance team up here to talk about the next three areas. I have 3 seats.
Good morning. So within the finance section, I will start off with the fund balance review, then we'll go to discuss OPEB, and then Matt Evans will wrap up our section with reviewing the debt layout. So an overview for fund balance, a reminder that fund balance is an accounting term. It is the difference between your assets and your liabilities. So when we look at the total amount of fund balance, the majority of the time we're referring to the fund balance just for the general fund. Although in our audited financials, you're going to see it covering all of your governmental. The one that we refer to and the one that our fund balance policy refers to is going to be just for the general fund. So it's going to cover portions of unavailable spend all the way to available. There's a state statute that supports using appropriated fund balance to help balance our budget as a balance budgeting tool. And we also have fund balance policies that relate to the amount that we must maintain for available fund balance within 15 to 20%, and another one that refers to our unassigned portion as well. So some of the typical uses of our fund balance. Well, first and foremost, fund balance being set aside, as we've seen reference from our school system, needing fund balance to be able to support cash flow until you see those cycles of revenues come through. So that is a basic common one, not necessarily the use of it being represented and reflected on your year-end fund balance on your financials, but it supports cash flow throughout the year. So it's also used for times when there's a revenue loss and economic declines, times of uncertainty, such as natural disasters or public health emergencies such as COVID. So when you look at fund balance, when you look at our financial statements, you're going to see a large number, and that number is broken into 5 components for your fund balance that go from the most restrictive down to the least. So you're going to start with the non-spendable fund balance, and these are going to be in forms that are contractually required and maintained to intact. An example of some of those non-spendable would be like prepaid items or lease receivables. Then we go to our restricted fund balance. So this would be a portion of the fund balance that is set aside, and this is going to be restricted and controlled by external parties. Those would be typically like your lenders. But a significant portion is going to be restricted by state statute. So you have a couple of different state statutes that restrict the funding there, and some of that is for our tax reappraisal, register of deeds, and then a large portion is restricted for state stabilization. So you'll see that in General Statute 159.13. So the next component of fund balance is your committed, where this is money that is set aside for a specific purpose, but then it's controlled by majority vote by the Board of Commissioners. So an example in our recent past is times where our unassigned fund balance have exceeded the 20%. And our fund balance policy states anytime it exceeds 20%, we will transfer that excess over to our capital programs. Well, that transfer would show up under your committed component of fund balance. So then we move down to the assigned. So this is going to be set aside, voted by the board, but it's also going to have clauses within those monies that would allow the county manager and such to be able to act upon spending that, such as appropriated fund balance. Money that we've set aside for our capital projects. And then when you go to the least restrictive, that is unassigned, and that's what's left over. So that is a big portion that would be available for us to spend. It's not committed anywhere. It's not obligated. We don't have purchase orders or encumbrances to be obligated to out of that money. So of the bottom three, committed, assigned, and unassigned, that's where our fund balance policy refers to available fund balance. So it's those that we actually have control over spending. So if there was something under the committed portion, we would have that option to bring those items back to the board to be able to take a vote to modify how we're spending, whereas non-spendable and restricted, we wouldn't have that option. So going back again to look at how we have preliminary unaudited year-end results of where our fund balance currently sits. The total amount for general fund balance is projected to end at $117.5 million. So the kind of the donut graph over to the right, it really breaks down those 5 components that we just reviewed. And you'll see the largest portion of those is between your unassigned and your restricted. So you'll see where the projected amounts for restricted at 48, almost 49 million, and 41 million of that is under that state stabilization. So you're going to see components of that still subject to change, but that is where our records currently reflect. So just revisiting where the Q4 presentation reflected where our available fund balance is showing at 14.6 as well as our unassigned. So when we look at considerations for our fund balance, we look at where the currently showing at 68.1 million, and that is equal to 14.6% of the general fund expenditures. When we look at what would be required to maintain fund balance policy of 15%, it would just be an additional 1.6 million. So we're very, very close. So should anything change or be adjusted with the final audit still in preparation, we have just right there at the cusp. So just a reminder, if we were to end the year with audited financials dipping below our fund balance policy, our policy requires that we also present a plan to replenish that fund balance back to the minimum of 15%.
Go back to the other slide. So I just want to reiterate what Melissa just said. At 49 million in restricted and 68 in unassigned, should anything switch, we are $1 million short of 15%. So if anything were to switch, and Mason and Matt, as they go through the budget every year, work through the audit with the auditors every year, they refine that restricted number more. So it could switch, a little bit could switch from restricted to unassigned, and that would get us to that 15% because we're that close to that million. So I know that they work through that pretty consistently. They go back and forth on, here's the calculation. State statute tells us what the calculation is, so there's not a lot of wiggle room. But sometimes, so this year, at being so close with only $1 million, we can get there.
And I have a question on this. I just want to make sure I've got this straight based on the presentation we had at the last meeting as well. So basically, we had to, because like really with the fund balance, we're usually looking at our general funds when we look at this percentage. And I believe, I think you said, so right here, 9.8 million was pulled to put into the Helene grant reimbursement or the grant funds, correct?
It wasn't necessarily pulled. It is showing up under that restricted because we have to restrict it to cover the negative balance. And so we're not transferring it. It's sitting there, but it's restricted to make up that negative balance for our overall governmental funds.
If you had not put it in there, like it would have been in just our
Yes.
regular general fund, so,
It
right?
would not be restricted.
It would not be
correct,
restricted, and so because we had, basically what I'm getting at is because we haven't got our reimbursements, right? We had to, I'm using the word pull because that just makes sense to me. It's a non-technical
You had to set
term.
it aside.
Pull.
You had to set it aside.
We're gonna set it aside, right, in order to make sure that we have that funding there.
Yes.
However, when we get the funding back, or we get reimbursed, then we would be able to put this back into the unassigned.
That's correct. It would fall to unassigned if it wasn't restricted.
Okay, so that's really what's got us. I mean, I know you all worked so hard, right, and we made lots of really hard decisions over this past year. And we're so close to meeting that, right, that fund balance goal there. And at the end of the day, the reason we haven't met it is because we're not getting the reimbursements as of yet that we need.
Correct. At the end of the fiscal year, we didn't have reimbursements in that fund to reflect a
Okay.
positive balance.
Okay,
In the Helene fund.
okay, thank you.
Correct.
And you've talked to Melissa about this, but that was the huge benefit of our cash flow this year, is they offset the amount that we needed to set aside to cover that cash gap.
Yes, thank you.
Any other questions about fund balance?
So fund balance is a conversation about resources left over after the activities of the year. This portion of the conversation is talking about management and use of some of those resources. So some of this may sound familiar to you. As an introduction or a reminder, Buncombe County provides health insurance coverage to certain eligible retirees until they reach Medicare age. For Buncombe County, that's what we refer to when we say other post-employment benefits, or OPEB. The benefit is closed to new hires, so eligibility ended for those folks who were hired after June 30th, 2015. But we still have a significant group of current and future retirees that are entitled to these benefits. So the county has this OPEB benefit included in our current and our long-term commitments. And the next question is kind of how are we paying for it? There are two ways. The first path is pay-go or pay-as-you-go basis, meaning we directly cover current retiree health insurance premiums each year from our operating budget. So that is an expenditure from the general fund for pay-go. The second approach is through an OPEB trust, which is effectively a savings and an investment account, which is funded by county contributions and investment earnings. So for organizations like us who do provide this OPEB type benefit, a trust is recommended and aligns to best practices from national and state chapters of the Government Finance Officers Association, State Treasurer's Office, our independent external auditors, credit rating agencies. These are groups who recommend having a trust, and they also consider how we're managing that trust when they evaluate our financial condition every year or when we go out for debt. By contributing regularly to the trust, we build up resources to pay future costs in a systematic, sustainable way. We manage risk and cost through investment earnings rather than relying on the general fund. So right now we're pay-going every year. We'll talk about that more. And we match our benefit funding more closely to the employees that are receiving the benefits. So we pay in now to cover the benefits of retirees after they are receiving the benefit. So why does this matter to today's discussion? OPEB is a long-term promise that the county has made to our retirees. It's a large and growing commitment, and how we fund it affects both today's financial flexibility and the county's long-term future financial health. We have skipped our annual contributions to the OPEB Trust 3 out of the past 10 years. That includes fiscal 25, which was last year, and fiscal 26, the current year. And that does help short-term budgeting. It relieves some of the current year expenditures in the general fund, but it increases our long-term cost. We'll talk about that more. Again, it also impacts how our auditors and our credit rating agencies evaluate our financial health. So that is a recap, I would say, of OPEB for Buncombe County. I think some of these points will seem familiar to you from prior year's budget discussions. For the next few minutes, I would like to discuss more specifically where the county's OPEB stands today. So currently, we have about 1,200 eligible participants in the OPEB plan that is pretty evenly split between active employees and eligible retirees and their beneficiaries. This number could change, but will generally remain stable. The county's total long-term commitment for OPEB as of June 30th of this year is about $123 million. That number represents the total cost the county is expected to pay for current and future retiree health insurance benefits. This number will change as health insurance costs and other plan costs change, as well as any changes to our eligible retiree population. In the near term, we know that this number is increasing. Toward that total cost, we've currently set aside about $54.6 million in the OPEB trust fund. Again, the trust is funded through annual contributions from the general fund and investment earnings on those contributions. The trust funds can only be used towards OPEB. Historically, we have contributed $2 million a year, but again, the exceptions to that were 3 of the last 10, fiscal 20, fiscal 25, and fiscal 26. There are no contributions or no planned contributions. As of June 30th of this year, the $54.6 million in the trust represents 44.5% of that $123 million in the county's total long-term projected commitment. So we will continue to pay out-of-pocket benefits until the trust is sufficiently funded to take over. That leaves roughly $68.1 million of the total commitment that is still unfunded. It will be paid either out of annual operating funds or taken over by the trust at some point. This number will change along with the other factors that we've discussed, which also includes a variable remaining timeline. While there's no new eligibility for the plan, there is some variability when the final eligible retirees' benefits will expire. Last fiscal year, so fiscal 25, we paid about $6.7 million out of pocket. That's our annual PAYGO cost, so that's the general fund paying for those current retiree benefits. Over the past 9 years, the PAYGO or the out-of-pocket payments have averaged $7.2 million per year. That's a general fund expenditure. As with other numbers discussed today, this number will change, so that annual PAYGO amount. And given the current healthcare environment, we know this number will increase in the near term. So those are numbers for high-level kind of look at the actual current status of OPEB. And as my final note, and for further context, I want to look at a specific example from one of the current 1,200 participants in the OPEB plan. So looking to that gray box at the right, let's say one employee retired at age 50 back in 2022. By those numbers, they have about 12 years of benefits remaining from today, and we'll assume their beneficiary spouse is the same age and is also receiving benefits. Based on premium rates since that retirement in 2022, we've already paid about $100,000 in benefits just for this single retiree. We estimate between now and 2037, when they age out, we'll pay an additional $340,000, which is actually a conservative number given the trend in healthcare cost. Consider that impact applied to 1,200 retirees over the next 25 years, give or take. Some retirees will age out of benefits, while others will begin newly drawing benefits. Our OPEB program represents a very significant long-term obligation, and the trust is really our tool, our best tool and only tool to manage this the most proactively. Are there any questions on OPEB?
Thank you so much. This is the best presentation I've had around this to really get a good understanding of it since I've been on the commission. So thank you for these details.
Commission, I'll say.
Please, go ahead.
I was going to say, when I came in, we started talking about health risk assessments. I did a roadshow and talked to as many employees and retirees as I could. And I met a retiree who was on her plan and just got married to a young lady and had a baby. So when I thought that as just retiree health, that this was going to be going down, that baby was a new dependent that he was bringing onto the plan. So that number is gonna grow. It's not as, we're thinking it's going down, but it could grow. I was very surprised to realize that. What do you mean you're having a new baby? But it was real. So I just wanted to point that out, that to Mason's point, that 122 is today's commitment, but that can grow, and healthcare cost is also gonna make it grow.
So this benefit ended in
2015.
2015.
For new people to join. I will say commissioners are still allowed, if they've served so many years, to still get on that. So we have not capped it for every single class of employees right now.
But I just want to, so it ended in 2015.
For employees.
For employees, but because that particular employee was already on it,
Yes,
he or she was able to
bring dependents
bring
on
dependents on, even though that came,
after
however many
2015, correct.
okay.
The 2015 date was the date of hire, so everyone hired before that date
Good point.
who retires is eligible.
Right, and then there are any
So they're
additional
stating,
family members?
any dependents,
Any
yes.
dependents, okay.
Of 1,200 eligible participants for the plan, there are about 600 of us still working in Buncombe County. That could add to that number, change our beneficiaries and dependent relationships.
You notice Mason uses the word us.
I made it, y'all.
The only two questions I have are, if we make modifications to the health insurance that we provide to our employees, are these folks locked into
Yes.
certain benefits, a certain, okay. And then the rising cost of healthcare, does that create a huge variable for these numbers that we then year by year just have to look at and see?
Yes.
Okay. And then the last question, federal impacts to Medicare, Medicaid, Obamacare, does that also impact the long-term trajectory of these funds as well?
So the federal impacts have not touched Medicare, which is your 65 and over. So, and the benefit we provide is until Medicare takes over, so.
So it could, if Medicare was changed, then,
Ours is the 65.
Yes.
does
Our
it say
benefit.
65 regardless of what they do?
I need to verify that. I thought it did, but we need to verify that. And Karen, I'm not sure she's here, but I know my team has got me covered. That's written down. So we'll get that answer back to you. I thought it was 65 because that's when we said Medicare Reserve. I don't think it just said Medicare eligibility, but Mason is also writing it down. So we'll follow up, especially with actuarial. And that's a great question.
And the takeaway is we definitely need to
Fund OPEB.
fund
Yes.
OPEB.
Yes.
But Medicare would be the thing. Obamacare and Medicaid wouldn't be factors for this particular.
Correct.
That's helpful, thank you.
We'll come back with that because there's also a portion that we pay for the supplements as well.
Correct.
Commissioners, we're talking about the things this morning that somewhat may get overlooked as you go through an operating budget cycle. So one of those things is debt service. And today we want to discuss the general fund supported debt service payments as we go into FY27. So this is a high-level discussion. John's reserved a future work session to talk about project level details. So just follow along on this journey at a high level with me. So it really boils down to two ideas here. There is general fund supported debt that you're committed to, you're on the hook for. And then there's some that exist in a future CIP or a future vehicle plan that's modeled out. So let's talk about the committed stuff first. On this graph, represented in that dark blue color, that's the current existing general fund debt service. That's the 18.3 that John mentioned before. Generally, the general fund debt service, if we look at it across a timeline from a current date such as today, it goes down. We did a refunding in 2024, which makes it spike up a little bit in 27, and then it goes back down. So current debt service 18.3, automatically out of the gate, it's going to be a little bit more than what you budgeted for FY26. We also have about $65 million in previously approved CIP projects. Again, we'll talk about those projects later. But that is things that we've budgeted prior budget cycles that we're currently paying invoices on that we'll need to pay ourselves back for. So we go through a process typically we started in the wintertime and we go through the the spring where we evaluate where we are on spending or where we think we're going to be on spending, and then we look at the markets and we gauge our debt issuances accordingly. These have not hit those thresholds yet or those metrics, but I anticipate some will, so, or all will. There's another light greenish, bluish, tealish color. That is you did 2 GO bond authorizations in 2022. Affordable housing, open space. We've only issued out of the 70 million total, around $15 million in debt, right? So questions that come through our office sometimes is you've issued $70 million in debt. We haven't issued $70 million in debt yet for the general obligation bonds. We've only done $15 million associated with affordable housing. So our team has modeled out what it may look like if we take that $55 million remaining. So again, you're committed to existing debt service, things we've already issued debt for. That gold section, which is your $65 million in previously budgeted approved projects we're spending money on, and then our $55 million in remaining GO bonds. So we also, through various plans, you've talked about it some today as you talked about vehicles, and you've talked about it when you were talking about future charging infrastructure. We have this CIP document that comes before you at the end of the year in the budget cycle where we have a plan. We have modeled out what it would look like if we issued debt across that plan. That's around $600 million currently in projects. So again, assumptions could change at this point in time. As we come back in January, it may look a little different. But the main takeaway I want you to have is you currently have budgeted $18.3 million in FY26. No doubt it is going up in 27. Modeled out, no doubt it is going up in future years. So as you consider operating and you consider salaries, et cetera, don't forget about the debt payments and the impacts if we forego things. So. Additionally, you've had conversations, you've heard from the school systems about aging infrastructure and needs that may exceed outside their own commissions. GO bonds were floated. What I wanted to present to you at a very, very high level is what happens if we take any amount of money, such as $10 million, and we issue GO bonds at an assumed rate of 4.5% over 20 years. We usually go over the life of an asset. You would, at $10 million, have interest payments or the cost of issuing the debt, $4.73 million, bringing that to a total of $14.73 million, or an annual debt service payment of right under $1 million. So let's follow the same example there and go down to $100 million. So if we're looking at $100 million, you add on a little over 47 million, bringing that to 147 million, or an average annual debt service payment of over $7 million. And I will note that this is averaged over 20 years, so the front years are typically higher. And laying that on top of the existing debt, you hit a max. 2032 and 2035, you're approaching $70 million, which is over 3 times, almost 4 times the current debt capacity you have now. So what we have to do is when we go through this budget cycle is we have to work strategically to figure out how we're going to make all this work. And again, that will happen at future conversations. But for now, any questions?
While we're, for those future conversations.
Sure.
Thank you for this high level. One thing that would help me, because I know we're having conversations with the schools, and then of course we have our housing and our open space bonds. And around the housing and the open space bonds, while we're exploring the potential, if we were to do those again, one thing that would help is to really dig in and look at what the needs are still with that, so that kind of capacity. And I think about that especially in relation to Helene recovery. And I look, when I'm looking through those Helene recovery projects, I mean, clearly housing is, no one has to figure out how that's connected, right? Like, that's very clear. But thinking about it in that way and what the needs are in our community and how we can help with that with Helene recovery. And then when I look back through it with the open space, I mean, it ties in directly with the food security, the rebuilding parks, restoring cultural assets, and the open space, all of those projects within Helene recovery as well. So being able to look at that and how the potential, if we decided to proceed with those, how these could potentially help with our Helene recovery. And you all know I'm all about leveraging funds and bringing in funds from the outside, and I still want us to do that. And I also realize that it may take us investing our local funds too to really help with our Helene recovery and get us there. So thinking about that in relation to those potential bonds would be helpful.
Commissioner, someone that's plugged in to both the recovery funding world and as well as the debt world, there's a lot of opportunity out there. So, and the key word is active. Everyone's active. We're actively pursuing grant opportunities. We're actively looking at multiple avenues. And then these subcommittees are also actively, they're looking at all their numbers too. So like the housing committees, working, they're doing their thing. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Thank you so much, folks.
Let's take a 5-minute break and return at 10:35. Thanks, everyone. I don't have a gavel. Good morning, Rachel.
Down is forward.
It's the budget reminder.
Yeah, I don't. Good morning. Ready to begin? Okay, so I am Rachel Sawyer and I lead the Strategic Partnerships Office, which specializes in both grants and community investments. Not all of the community investments that I'll talk about today are managed within the Strategic Partnerships Department and Cost Center. I'm here representing a suite of different investments that are essentially commissioner-driven priorities that are over and above what counties must do. If you were to look at counties across the state of North Carolina, some would have programs like these and some would not, which is sort of what has classified them together as discretionary community investments for the purpose of this conversation. The ones that we're putting here for your awareness today are programs that we anticipate you seeing budget requests for as we head into the fiscal year 27 budget year. So beginning with the Affordable Housing Services Program. This program is a little bit different than some of the others. You'll see budgets versus actuals on the rest. This is actually handled as an interfund transfer from the general fund to the Affordable Housing Services Program. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Great. I can't remember the name of the other fund that goes to, but essentially this, what you're seeing in the dark blue, is a trend of the general fund investment toward this. And in FY25 and then again in FY26, there's significantly less investment. And this ties to a topic you were just speaking about previously, which is the ability to finance affordable housing using bond funds. And so while we've got those general obligation bonds, the commissioners opted to reduce the amount of general fund investment. So overall housing investment has continued even though this particular stream of funding is lower. So no determination yet about what will be presented in FY27, but this is a program that we do anticipate continuing. This is also a little bit different than the others in that this is not only grant funds. Some of these funds are loan financing to the development partners. And so there is some revenue generating component to this as loans are repaid. And you can see there are some examples of key accomplishments under the program. Next, we have aging funds. And the reason this is called supplemental is we do manage an outside fund that we pass through called HCCBG. It's another one of those block grants. This is the Home and Community Care Block Grant. This is managed through Health and Human Services. In addition, Buncombe County opts to invest additional funds over and above what we pass through. And that extends the reach. You can see the examples of the kinds of programs and services for older adults that get funded with these dollars. You've got budget in blue and actual in orange. In FY25, there were measures, you'll notice this on several different slides, to constrain and limit the amount of funding when our revenues were uncertain as a result of Tropical Storm Helene. And then the amount that was budgeted for FY26 is also a reduced amount here as a result of the budget environment. We also have an arts funding program. This is handled like a block grant in that Buncombe County Commissioners have designated an official arts agency, that's Arts AVL. And so this funding, which began for the first time in fiscal year '24, goes as a contract to Asheville, to AVL Arts, previously known as Asheville Area Arts Council, who then re-grants. And so they operate two primary grant programs, the Arts Build and the Grassroots Arts programs with this funding, and then use a portion of it for arts sector studies. That number seems like a very specific number, 129,788. That was determined at its launch based on, I think it was a 2020 most recent 5-year census, total population in the county at a 50-cent per capita rate. That's how it was initially calculated and has stayed flat since that time. Buncombe County also invests, as you know, in conservation easements. And like the trend that you saw with affordable housing, we've got a bond, the open space bond, which can support land conservation. The FY26 dollar amount rationale is essentially to cover the fees and closing costs and allow bond funds to cover the easement purchases. And this is around land protection, and you can see examples of the numbers of acres conserved, making great progress in that arena around conserving 20% of the county's land. Early Childhood Fund. It's hard to believe that this one has been around as long as it has. This was established for FY22. We may have actually had it in FY21, but it was in place across the full 5 years represented here. And this dollar figure goes up by 2% a year per the county resolution that commissioners approved at its establishment. But in FY26 was held flat as a result of budget constraints. This is overseen by the Early Childhood Education Committee and goes out to community-based organizations in the form of grants. This actually sits as a separate fund now. So if and when there are instances of grants not being fully drawn down, like an organization has a vacancy and can't spend all of their personnel money, those dollars get retained year over year within the Early Childhood Fund.
They're established as a multi-year project in the Special Projects Fund. Affordable housing follows the same logic.
Thank you. Commissioners also direct several contracts that sit in a cost center called Education Support. This funds the Career Academy, CALA, and school community impact funding. If you look at this one over time, it does go up and down as a result of certain projects being present here and then going away. We did have the school consolidation feasibility study that was budgeted in this cost center. And you'll recall the pilot program that happened over a three-year period focusing on literacy. And there was also previously a museum operation contract in this cost center. Homeowner grants you all talked about recently. Philip Harden did a presentation. The one piece of additional information, I guess, that this can bring in as follow-up to that was what were the actuals compared to the budget each year. It is budgeted at $300,000 for FY26. And here's one that I'm going to spend a few extra minutes on, which is the strategic partnership grants. This is a very long-standing grant program. When I first came to the county, it was known as Buncombe County Community Funding. It's operated as sort of it's an open competitive grant application that nonprofit organizations or fiscal sponsors can apply for funding across the spectrum. Rather than specialized like each of those other investments that has a target focus area, this is really anything that aligns with the county's strategic goals / strategic plan. It's been a $900,000 grant for the last 3 years. It was rounded up from a previous actual. And as you can see, spending each year is roughly equal to the budget. But again, in stewardship of county funds, if there's ever instances where an organization isn't able to carry out their work, we recoup the funds. This sits within the general fund, so that would just flow back to general fund. It funds an average of 25 projects a year. As you can see, the examples quite varied. This was paused. It's not currently active in the FY26 budget. It was one of the programs that when we were evaluating opportunities to get to a balanced budget for FY26 was set to the back burner. Now that we have a new strategic plan, we are proposing to relaunch this investment program. You have recently adopted the strategic plan, so you're quite familiar with these focus areas and objectives. What I like about this view of it is it shows the list with the white background of strategic objectives, which is what we are proposing the community-based organizations align to. So looking at that list, they would essentially select their best fit that they would be proposing to work toward and produce outcomes toward. So we are, like I said, looking to relaunch this for FY27, which starts next July 1. It takes roughly 18 months to institute a 12-month period of performance for a community investment grant. And that's so that we can prepare the application, have the committee approve that, go out to the community to promote the opportunity to apply, review the proposals, develop contracts, and get them in folks' hands as soon as possible and as close as possible to that July 1. So they've got the full 12 months to use the funding. So we are taking steps to relaunch that now and bring the Strategic Partnership Grant Committee back together. We would also want commissioners to see that we're looking to fold in some of the other standalone grant programs that existed FY25 and previous. So community recreation grants was a standalone grant program that was paused last year and not budgeted for FY26. The same is true for tipping point grants. Those were both $100,000 grant programs that we think we can accomplish within the structure of the strategic partnership grants. We are proposing to prioritize tolling recovery projects within this next funding cycle. And just want you to be aware that even though we say you can apply under any strategic objectives, we would need to make sure that, as we did before, we're excluding certain kinds of applications. If we have a specialized fund for affordable housing development, we would not also take affordable housing applications in the strategic partnership grant program, as is true for the other duplications. As we relaunch this, want to be really clear with staff and with the committee about their roles in the process. We would look to the Board of Commissioners to adopt that strategic plan and establish the strategic objectives, and that has been completed. To appoint members of the Strategic Partnership Grant Committee. We do have vacancies on that committee, so advertising and looking to fill that and bringing forward to you additional members or additional applicants for consideration. My recollection is that that's a 9-member committee. You've got a resolution that you maintain related to the funding of nonprofit organizations. That's still in the books. I think the most recent update to that resolution was a few years ago. I was going to say 2021, but then I wondered if I was correct. So we can look that up if you're curious. That could be a follow-up item that we send to you. That resolution essentially says when we fund nonprofit organizations, here are the parameters. They have to go through a competitive process. They need to submit financials to the county, not a full audit. It spells out like a tiered structure where larger organizations would submit an audit, then smaller organizations have an opportunity to submit a different type of financial statement, but it's around sort of the accountability requirements for nonprofits to receive public funding. So you set that for us. The board also, of course, adopts the annual budget with consideration of the recommended grant awards. So when you get your recommended budget in May of 2026, we would anticipate to have a list of grant recommendations as provided to you by the Strategic Partnership Grant Committee. And staff will be there managing all processes in the grant life cycle from application through closeout. And that's my last slide. So before I move on, any questions or additional information we can come back with in addition to the resolution?
Yeah, I have a few comments and a question.
Sure.
With the let's see, it was the Affordable Housing Services Program, Aging Services, and the conservation easements. Those were all reduced because of budget considerations. So I certainly would appreciate seeing all those restored as we begin our budget, is at least getting them to the level where they had been before. With those, I think I covered all of the, and the aging services, because all 3 of those were reduced.
And I believe aging services was also based on usage as well.
Yeah, there were some impacts about the ability to provide the service.
Okay, that was needed.
So
the
we'll
reduction was not
definitely
just
work with David and his team to see what the best funding level is to manage.
So it wasn't just because of
Maximize
our budget
services.
reductions,
Yes,
is
ma'am.
what you're saying on
Yes,
that
ma'am.
one. Okay, so y'all coming back with more information on that as
Yes.
well, thank you.
But yeah, the intent today was that we would start from where we were,
Okay,
and then we start there, and then decisions be made later.
okay,
These are the programs that we anticipate keeping active.
okay.
Yes.
And then on the strategic partnership grants, on that one, oh yeah, my question was just, which it makes sense to me. I get what you're saying about combining the tipping point and the rec grants and kind of simplifying that, so I understand that.
Yeah, it takes about as much effort to operate a $100,000 grant program as it does a $1 million grant program. Not exactly, but there certainly is an ease on staff to combining them. We have diverted some of our grant manager time over to not the community investment side of the house, but helping our departments go after external grants to be grant managers where we are the grantee. And so we're looking for efficiencies, and this was a good one that we saw.
And so my question within it, though, is with the recreation grants, I know that is something that many of our kind of more rural areas count on to be able to go after that to help them update a playground or their walking track and all of those type of things. And so I want to make sure that we don't lose, because that's really that's the only funding they have typically to go after. And so I just want to make sure that that doesn't get lost within this big pot and the ability for them to, go. Sometimes it's $3,000 or $5,000, and that makes a huge difference to them and what they're able to do and provide for the community.
Yeah, understood. Both the tipping point and the community recreation grants were in that $5,000 to $6,000 cap range. And so the current thinking is to have 2 different levels of funding that organizations could apply for within the strategic partnership grants, a smaller, maybe capped at, say, $10,000 grant, or a larger grant capped at more similar to what strategic partnerships had been capped at before, with a simpler application and reporting pathway and a more complicated, more in-depth accountability and reporting for the higher dollar award. We always work to try to keep the barriers to participation as low as possible, and that was one of the ideas that's on the table for the next round.
On that, could we potentially outline a certain percentage of the grant? Let's just say we combine those grants into one. Could we say our goal is for 20%, or approximately about what that percentage would have been, will go towards programs that achieve X, Y, and Z. And so it's a way to just ensure that those programs don't get crowded out as they join a bigger pie, because they're going to be competing for those dollars, right? So
we absolutely could structure it in any way that we choose. I will say that in the past, when we've talked about segmenting or holding funding for focus areas, it's been complicated because the applications don't always come in. We used to have, I think, 4 community-facing focus areas, and now I think we're looking at 6. So we could say, 1/6 of the funding goes to growth and development, to economic development, but because of nuances, and some projects are more expensive to carry out. So that's a little bit of a slippery slope. However, if we're having 2 levels, the say $10,000 grants and the larger grants, we could say that we're looking to fund this % of the funding at the smaller grants and this % of the funding at the larger grants. There's lots of ways to structure it. We continually tinker with the investment process to try to do the best we can by it without making broad changes that would have unintended consequences to the partners. And so these community-based organizations used to have a place they could apply, like you said, to compete for recreation funding, and so we want to make sure that's still there.
The only thing I would like to clarify, it would not be a recreation grant. They would still apply. That would be only be maybe energy and environment. Because the goal would be that what we do would be to structure our plan based on our strategic plan. So the application would come under one of these. It wouldn't be a recreation grant. It could be an outdoor, because outdoor talks about mental well-being and all those things. So they would have to find themselves in one of these structures.
Well, that's my question. Are they going to be able, for recreation, like if they need to improve the playground or the walking track, are they going to be able to do that?
But I think they can find themselves there. We were very intentional as we wrote our strategic plan that everything we do is covered in our strategic plan. So yes, I do think they can find themselves there, but we would not advertise a recreation grant. It would be for outdoor, yes. Okay.
Yeah, I think that community health is a good fit with recreational outcomes. And we offer not just outreach and grant writing workshops, but one-on-one consultations where an applicant can book a 30-minute slot with a staff person and get advice about how to craft their application, so we can brainstorm specifically with different groups about where they fit. I see a connection and don't have a concern that recreation would not fit.
Yeah, that's the first place my mind went to, was Yeah, improving healthier and safer communities.
And it's always been a little bit of a trick. Things like may create jobs and economic outcomes and health outcomes. And so organizations, do we allow them to choose as many as they fit in? Do we try to have them choose the best fit? Back to tinkering, we've done it both ways. It's imperfect, but it gives us a way to organize and get a sense of the impact.
I want to make sure, I think it's the slide ahead of the next one. There we go. Bullet number 4, I don't think we really addressed, but I think we would be remiss to not acknowledge that many of these grant applications, the focus of the award is Helene recovery and how that fits into our strategic plan.
Helene recovery is not a separate topic, right? The way we've talked about, the ability for people to stay employed and stay housed and be well cuts across all of our different focus areas. So the idea of adding a separate focus area, which would be Helene, didn't make a lot of sense as we ran through it, but it could be a priority across the focus areas.
Thank you for that further explanation, Rachel. Are there any other questions for her?
Just to thank you and appreciate the thought that went into things that are very important to each of us personally and to our community. To see that kind of spelled out of what that's looked like over the past few years shows us how far we've come, but also the difficult decisions that we've had to make and the number of hats you've been wearing.
You're welcome.
And that's a perfect segue. Thank you.
So I'm going to bring up both Kevin Mattson, our new recovery officer, and Taylor Jones, our emergency services director, as we move into a brief discussion of recovery and preparedness.
Good morning, Commissioners. Kevin Mattson, the new Helene Recovery Officer. Thank you all for the opportunity this morning to talk about the Helene Recovery Plan. I have a slide behind us, but I'm just going to kind of talk through aspects of the plan this morning and some of the things that we're looking at moving forward. I've heard Helene mentioned in almost every aspect of the conversation today. It's an integrated piece of what we're talking about for projects moving forward in our current fiscal year and fiscal year 2027. I also know that next Tuesday, November 18th, y'all have on the meeting agenda for the endorsement of the full Helene Recovery Plan and the county-specific portion of it as well. At that point, we'll be talking about the 114 projects across 7 jurisdictions, our 6 municipalities, and then, of course, the 31 focused on Buncombe County. With the adoption of those 31 projects, we'll be able to look at how we can provide an implementation plan. At present, those 31 projects have been identified to be expanded out to 136 sub-projects. So fairly complex in the ability for us to implement them and our impacts to our other county departments. Just as a quick reminder, that plan was built on extensive planning and collaboration with our other county departments, our municipal partners, our community members, and the Envision Buncombe public engagement piece as well. And I've heard the commissioners speak about it being an integral part of our planning and our budget process moving forward, and how we are looking to link every aspect of the recovery plan to the 2030 strategic plan focus areas as well. It is important to note that one county department is identified for 51 sub-projects. So the varying complexity, the varying needs will be outlined when we build that implementation plan as far as how we'll be collaborating on that process. Other projects are a 1-to-1 ratio. We may have one project, such as the Community Memory Project, which is one sub-project, very important project being led by the library in partnership with our Helene Recovery Office. On the other front, the FEMA Public Assistance version of the landslide mitigation will likely be run by the Helene Recovery Office, one of the project management positions, and that one project has 11 sub-projects to it, just as examples of how that's broken out for the process. But then in addition to that, landslide mitigation tied to the hazard mitigation grant program being funded through the state and FEMA is done in partnership with emergency services. As we talk about those 31 projects, expertise will vary significantly in what we're looking at for bringing in technical partners from contracted services and internal staff. So the commitment from staff hours will vary based on each of the projects. And then, of course, keep in mind of the 31 projects, those are our focus area, but there will still be collaboration on the other 3 projects with our municipal partners. We'll be maintaining partnerships to look at best practices and how we can support each other through the process. One of the other key things just want to mention is when we talk about complexity, I remember John mentioning the vehicle replacements are tied to insurance and tied to FEMA public assistance. So we're working, as Matt said, on active engagement, looking at grant funding sources, and those funding streams will help be providing the budget for these projects as we move forward, and looking at how we get as much reimbursement as possible through our federal partners. And then, of course, once adoption is completed next Tuesday, we'll be looking at doing an implementation plan being led in collaboration with the Helene Recovery Office on how we actually put our benchmarks and our goals associated on those. So we can have more definitive timelines on if this is a multi-year project, a multi-month, depending on the expertise required. And then a quick update on the Helene Recovery Office. Obviously, I started November 3rd, so I'm going on week 2 now. I believe there was a statement in the commissioners meeting that I came back for day 2. I've actually come back for day 7 now, so we'll count that as a success, looking for double digits next week. But we do have 2 project managers that have closed on Monday of this week and 1 business analyst. We're looking to hire those by end of the year to support these projects and these programs. So of the projects you're looking at on the screen, those project managers will be our lead collaborating entity from the Helene Recovery Office. And those will be funded with grant funds that we're securing over this process, looking up to a 5-year window. I know right now, just on that front, Category Z, we've already had 2 versions of the FEMA Public Assistance administrative costs submitted. So we're moving forward and getting some of those grant funding sources already. And any questions in regards to some of that basic overview on the Helene Recovery Plan?
Sounds like progress.
Yes.
We like progress.
Yes.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you.
So Commissioners, as we've talked about the preparedness action plan, and to Commissioner Wells' point, we like progress. We've got a lot of progress in the 6 years, coming up on my 6 years here, that we've actually elevated public safety in our community. We've got the community paramedic program, we've enhanced our EMS fleet, we've enhanced our training center, EMS, emergency management. All these things led to us being in a better readiness and preparedness state for Helene. But we now find ourselves in a different environment. And when I look at this preparedness and action plan, and the 49 recommended actions, it's going to require a lot of lift. This plan is not only to improve the future of preparedness and the readiness in the county and the response in the county, but it's the overall interoperability and collaboration of all departments. So when I'm here today to talk about is not just what our needs are in emergency services, but to also look at the other bigger departments that's going to help us lift this together, like Health Human Services. They have a lot of big lifts. ESF 8 has a lot of responsibilities. Mass Care, a lot of things that they're doing together. Next slide, please. So when we look at these priorities and action items, we look at the procurement of a new emergency operations center, the backup of the infrastructure with a strong IT, providing emergency training to the county staff. Those align with strategic goals that's already been established about, more education, more training, more professional development, as John was speaking to earlier. Our training department, just in EMS, I have 1 training officer for 178 employees. Now I've got all this additional training that we're adding on to our community to change our culture around emergency services. So there's going to be some infrastructure and personnel requests around that to build that inner strength that we need to have a better program across the county. But what I'm really looking for is the continued support that y'all have given us, not only in our department, but across the county to elevate emergency preparedness. Any questions?
Taylor, you addressed it a little bit with what you just said, but seeing that bottom sentence about 2 departments assigned 49% of the 49 actions in the action plan, talk to us a little bit more about capacity within public safety to accomplish those goals with, that seems significant.
On a blue sky day, we do really well in emergency service. Blue Sky Day, Health Human Services, Sheriff's Office, all of our partners, they do good. You know this from your Red Cross background, you know? But it's when we have those gray sky days and we start having people like Billy that was up here earlier, that's also the training manager, it's also the security guy that's wearing multiple hats. How do they make enough time to go around to do all the things? And what I'm hoping to do is realign our investment strategy, okay, to have more personnel available, you know, to do these things. And, you know, we've looked at alternate ways like the grant that y'all recently approved for us that, you know, is going to enhance our community paramedic program. We're talking with other partners. So we're trying to elevate this together so that we're stronger, but it boils down to 2 departments are going to have the heaviest lift here is Health Human Services and Emergency Services. There's a lot of other departments going to be doing a lot of things too. I don't want to leave them out because every department in this county has a role in this after action plan. And so far, we're making tremendous movement on that, but we're in a blue sky day. We got the PGA coming. We got all these new things coming that's going to require additional workload. And I just want to make sure that that's on everyone's radar.
Thank you, Taylor.
Thank you.
Questions for Taylor or Kevin? Thank you, John.
Thank you.
We're going to bring up David Sweat, our Health and Human Services Director, and he's going to talk about some federal legislation and impacts we're seeing. Which was the down? Down goes up. Okay, that's the budget. It always goes down.
Okay. Good morning, Commissioners. So we're going to go over several things. A lot of things have changed overnight, so some of the later slides about the shutdown, we may have to just sort of freelance some of that because there have been new developments. But I want to help you understand the impacts of recent federal legislation for sure, and then we'll discuss the impacts of the shutdown and where we are today. So the bill that you've heard often referred to, One Big Beautiful Bill, also known as House Resolution 1, H.R. 1. In Health and Human Services, what this legislation is going to do is make it tougher for people to get or to keep their Medicaid and SNAP benefits, right? So it's a bill designed to increase hurdles and barriers. And it does also shift financial responsibility for on the administrative costs from that currently are borne more largely by the federal government to states and counties as part of maintaining the programs that are supported. That's obviously going to have fiscal impacts here in Buncombe County. Right now, for Medicaid background, 20% of the residents in Buncombe County are enrolled in Medicaid as of June. So that number varies every month. You have some people come on, some people come off, but in June it was about 62,000, more than 62,000 people. And obviously this gives health coverage to thousands of low-income children, adults, seniors, covering doctor visits, hospital care prescriptions, and a number of different health services. And Medicaid as a program is funded by both states and the federal government. It's a shared funding obligation. It is the largest single health insurance program in the United States. And here in Buncombe County, just a couple other things, 26,000 children were enrolled in Medicaid in October, and about 6,256 seniors over the age of 65 here in Buncombe County at the end of October. So that's just to give you an idea of who's the Medicaid population.
Can you say those numbers again, please?
Yeah, so at the end of October, we had 26,307 children who were between the age of 0 and 18 enrolled, and 6,256 adults over the age of 65. So, now, this bill did not directly attack or address any fiscal changes, but certainly did bring a lot of policy changes to the Medicaid program. The biggest of those is an introduction of work requirements for clients who are between the ages of 19 and 64 years old. In North Carolina, work requirements have never been a feature of Medicaid. That has been a feature in some other states, but never before in North Carolina. Now it will be. And the Medicaid expansion program recertifications now, so that's the people who got Medicaid as a result of Medicaid expansion in North Carolina. So those specific cases, those will have to be recertified on an every 6-month basis instead of a once-a-year basis. So that doubles the workload around recertification for that subset of the Medicaid cases that we administer.
Do you know how many is in that subset?
Well, our current recertification caseload is about 49,000 recerts, and we're projecting that this increase will mean in an annual basis, we'll be doing closer to 63,000 recertifications instead of 49,000, so it's an increase by that much. And looking at our most representative month that we have actual data, that's where we drew those numbers. That was from August. And we are just estimating right now based off current policy. And this is important because some of the details of the impacts, we're having to guess a little bit because the legislation gave the federal government until next June to write some of the guidance that they have to provide to the states. And then the states will have to take that guidance and provide guidance to us. So we're in this unfortunate situation where we're having to build a budget based on assumptions reflecting guidance we don't know for sure what it's going to say. So that's just a few caveats of where we are as we try to think through the budget that needs to start next July, given that the federal government may not give us relevant guidance until after you've adopted the budget. Just FYI. If you want to talk about that, we can.
Are we responsible for ensuring work requirements are met? Or we don't even know yet, or if that's going to be a state responsibility or local?
Exactly. No, work requirement, that verification stuff, that's what we do. That's what we do. So.
Do you expect that will potentially increase costs for program oversight, may potentially eat into our ability to serve our residents?
Well, so there's several pieces of this where it's going to increase costs for us. The increased workload, means that there's going to be some cost. We think we can manage most on the Medicaid side, the increased workload. We think we can absorb that. But when we get to SNAP, which is the next category to discuss, that's where we're really going to have some things, because part of the funding is driven by error rates, and the state's error rate overall governs the cost share that North Carolina as a state will bear, and we play a role, along with all the other 99 counties in the state, play a role in trying to do it right so that the error rate would be lower, so that it would cost North Carolina less, but it's a shared responsibility situation. Mm-hmm. But it's definitely more of the cost impacts are going to be felt in SNAP. But it's not without impact in Medicaid. So looking at SNAP, that's the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. Right now, about 10% of the residents of Buncombe County receive SNAP benefits. That was as of June. And this helps low-income families buy groceries. It is a supplement. It is not enough to buy a month's worth of groceries. We're talking about a few $100s. But every month between SNAP and WIC combined, we're putting about $5 million of supplemental nutrition assistance into the system. Every one of those dollars generates an additional $1.50 to $1.80 in local economic activity, most of that in grocery store spending. That supports jobs in grocery stores and also throughout the food distribution economy, and also helps our local farmers as well. And whenever we have economic instability, whenever we have natural disasters, any other sort of emergencies, we see SNAP enrollments go up. So that Medicaid is a little bit more of a more stable program, whereas SNAP benefits definitely fluctuates with economic conditions in the county. It goes up in times of more economic hardship. Now, this is where the biggest budget impact is going to be fiscally in the next 12 months. Right now, current year, on the administrative cost share, and what that means is the money that we use to pay the salary and benefits of the staff in economic services and in health and human services that do this work. Half of the cost for that is borne by Buncombe County, and half of the cost is borne by the federal government. And that is a current county investment of almost $5 million. But in the budget that will start next time, the cost share has shifted per the legislation. So Buncombe County will now be responsible for 75% of the administrative cost, and the federal government will pay 25%. And we estimate that's going to be an increase, or it'll move us up to $6.86 million in cost to maintain the same staffing footprint we have today. Would cost us that much more money because of this cost shift. It's about $1.9 million.
I just have to say, nothing about this sounds very beautiful to me.
Yeah. Now, before I get into shutdown, I just want to stop with that and let's answer any questions you have between John and I. We'll try, and we've also got Philip and Kelly in the room. So anything that we can answer for you about the situation as we see it at this moment.
Well, I'll just say thank you for everything you and your staff have done around SNAP and everything we've been going through with that, and everything that you're going to continue to be asked to do through these very challenging times that we're dealing with here and helping people in our community who are in a lot of need.
Thank you. We're very proud of what we've been able to do right now, and I want to speak just to a couple minutes. We had several slides prepared about the shutdown, but as you know, the government was voted to be reopened this morning. So if it's okay, I'd like to deviate from the slides and just bring you up to speed. Since we experienced the shutdown and we had the press conference that we all participated in on October 29th, we have been trying to mitigate the harms of the shutdown here in Buncombe County. So we've been able to generate per Manna Food Bank yesterday, they told us that 6,500 pounds of additional food has been donated to the system during the food drive that we've been running. And that's definitely between 6,500 and 7,000 meals that we've been able to have the community generously support to help the families that were facing the loss of SNAP benefits. We do have stable funding through WIC, so that was never disrupted. That's good. And since both WIC and SNAP are funded by U.S. Department of Agriculture and the legislation that was signed into law last night, funds the U.S. Department of Agriculture through September of next year. We now have stability in both of those programs, at least till the next federal fiscal year. There are still some details that we don't understand exactly where we are, particularly around low-income energy assistance, which is also a USDA-funded program. There's some news articles today saying that it may take 4 weeks for the LEAP funding to be running smoothly again. But in conversation with Philip, that is not necessarily a huge problem because the crisis intervention funding is already there. And for the general population, LEAP applications don't really open up till January. So I think this 4-week delay on LEAP funding is not going to be a critical problem, but we are not fully restored on LEAP. And there's a lot of fine print detail that we need to digest on in the next couple of days and wait for state guidance. So, but the good news is the government is reopened. U.S. Department of Agriculture is funded. They say that within the next few days, the schedule of loading benefits into SNAP will resume. WIC was never disrupted. And as a community, our plan is to continue the food drive through October the 22nd, and then at the end of the holiday parade and the close of business at the libraries on October 22nd, the food drive will end, and we will all, I hope, have a happy Thanksgiving.
November 22nd.
November 22nd is when we plan to end the food drive.
And for folks who have had SNAP benefits paused, do we have a timeline for when that back payment may happen? I know it's
Right.
staggered and based on the kind of last 4 digits of the number.
That's part of the detail and guidance that we need the state to now come in with. I mean, the legislation was signed, but until USDA gives the state's guidance and the guidance flow that down to us, there's some details I'm not going to be clear on.
Makes total sense.
It's actually ready to go, the file, ready to be sent.
You have to use
The file is ready to be sent from the state to our provider. They're just waiting for a letter from USDA. So the minute they get that letter from USDA, it will happen immediately, overnight.
Is there anything that we can do communicating with our federal elected representatives to encourage that? I mean, we can coordinate. I mean, if, as local electeds, we can push to get these answers.
I mean, I really would be at a loss to tell you what to lobby for right now. We got the government reopened, so. Any further questions for me?
So I want to understand, going back to the cost share breakdown. So it appears that a significant amount of the federal cost savings that were in the OBBB were just simply a shifting.
Cost shifting.
Just cost shifting to counties that have fewer tools in our toolbox to raise revenue than the federal government does, and who also have to maintain a balanced budget.
Right, and now the biggest cost impact is not actually to the counties, it's actually to the state, because in this shift, North Carolina is now gonna also be responsible for paying 15% of the benefit cost. And for the state, that's estimated to be about $420 million. And that's new money that North Carolina will be on the hook to in order to maintain SNAP. And that's why we are not optimistic that the state is going to help the counties with the administrative costs because they're on the hook for the $420 million of benefit costs.
So the
they'll
$5
push it
million,
back to us.
the $5 million in SNAP benefits you see here is direct federal funding. So, and that's, some of that is what the state will be picking up.
So we should be planning that the state will push some of those costs to us as well,
Well,
to
if you want
counties.
to, if you want to lobby something, it would be lobbying Raleigh.
Yeah, I don't imagine the state will send a benefit
John?
to us, but I don't think they'll help us pay the 50%, now 75% on the city side.
I think we have a question.
Commissioner Salon?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask because I'm guessing, maybe even hoping people and the press are going to notice this slide and that due to the actions of Congress, essentially $2 million is just evaporated from our budget. So I just want to, I guess, hear you guys explain briefly how this is required and why we have to, I'm assuming we have to continue this administration of this program
So,
through the county. Is that correct?
yeah, so in the state of North Carolina, what we have is state supervised but county administered programs in the realm of health and human services. And we're operating under U.S. Department of Agriculture and HHS guidance on what we're required to do programmatically. And the other issue is that the error rate, we didn't really get into all this because the impacts are more for the state than it is for the county. So we have a bunch of data on this, but the issue is that the amount of money the program that the state will have to pick up on benefit costs is actually variable based on the error rate in the processing of the applications and handling of the cases. And so the lower your error rate is, the less your state is required to have a cost share. And so to help the state out, us having the lowest possible error rate is a benefit to the state, but that means we need to do our job well and do it carefully, and that requires staff. Trained staff who knows what they're doing.
Yeah, okay. Thanks, John.
Doing it.
David, thanks to you and your team for everything that you all did through the month of October, through this morning, to county leadership and the CAPE team. I don't think I could ever get on any kind of social media and not see something being posted about the food drives and how people could help and support our neighbors who were in need over these really devastating last few months. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Commissioner, I agree, and I do want to say to David and the team, I think we had 8,000 pounds of food.
8,500 as of last night.
As of last night.
So that's a
That's
huge
great.
thanks to our community as
Absolutely.
well. So I
Yes.
just want to make
And to
sure.
our
Thank you for
community.
your leadership, but our community really
They
stepped up.
And they continue to.
And we are working on a press release right now. I don't know if it will come out. Lillian will let me know. It'll either be today or tomorrow to help the community understand current situation and also give them instructions about if you still want to donate to the food drive, how to do that. So that'll be coming.
Thank you.
We want to be proactive and get our pantry stocked.
Absolutely.
Just a couple other federal impacts. These are not necessarily related to the shutdown. We've seen some with the executive orders earlier this year, not as much clarity around grant funding. We do have $3 million of grant funding, federal funding for our Justice Services Department. And we're also unclear on whether or not federal EPA grants will continue. These make up 33% of the revenues for the air quality, for the Department of Air Quality. We haven't seen any interruption in federal transportation authority grants. The last item we have on our agenda today is a fire district update, and Rafael Baptista is joining us.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm here to give you an update on a project we've been undertaking since August with our fire department chiefs here in Buncombe County. So to give you a little bit of context, North Carolina general statutes state that Buncombe County is responsible for fire protection in all unincorporated areas of the county. So the responsibility for that service falls on the county. The way we provide that service is we have individual fire districts, tax districts throughout the county, and then we contract with nonprofit fire departments, and in some cases municipal fire departments, to provide that service. The tax rates, the rates that our property owners pay across those districts varies. There's quite a bit of range. I believe you have a handout in your packet that shows ranges from 9 cents to around 24 cents. In addition to the varying price or cost that our property owners pay, the service standards vary across those tax districts. Some districts are able to maintain full staffing 24/7, and some are much more dependent on volunteers. And that's a common thing across North Carolina. So with that in mind, in preparation for the FY27 budget year, county staff have been working with our fire chiefs to really evaluate the current status of fire service within Buncombe County, the funding model, in an effort to move to a single fire tax district. So instead of having 19 different tax districts, we have a single tax district. We would still have our 19 different departments, and they would still have their response areas, but from a funding mechanism, we would have a single tax district, and the money could float around depending where we need it from the county. And we'd be funding fire service similar to how we fund other areas with kind of a countywide funding model there. So the challenges that this project is seeking to address is one is uneven financial sustainability across Buncombe County fire departments. We have 19 different departments, all with very different elements of financial health and sustainability. So trying to seek to address some of those issues. To support our fire departments, about 2 years ago, the county did commission a salary study and compensation study. And the thing we heard overwhelmingly from the fire chiefs in that study, as well as from firefighters and from the data, was we have challenges recruiting and retaining firefighters in this county. Not all our fire departments have the ability to afford to provide health insurance. Some of the hourly rates are not as high in other departments. We do have some challenges there. So we have uneven fire service standards throughout the county combined with some uneven property tax rates. We're trying to address all that. So what we're trying to do is shift from the 19 individual tax districts to a countywide tax district with a single tax rate, still maintaining those 19 departments. So we're not changing the provider of the service, we're changing the funding mechanism of how we provide that service. Also working with the fire chiefs to develop minimum fire service standards. So if you are a resident in Buncombe County and you request assistance from a fire department, what is the minimum service level that you should expect regardless of where in the county you are? We are not the only county to do that. There are a lot of other counties in North Carolina that have undergone similar efforts over the recent years, over 17 of them, in eastern, central, and western North Carolina. So we are seeking to learn from them. We've been meeting with them. We've been reaching out to them. The fire chiefs have also been reaching out to the fire departments in some of those counties to get that perspective as well. So we're not trying to reinvent the wheel. We're trying to learn from what others have done. So the project status is that at this point we've had 4 facilitated work sessions with the fire chiefs. And we have bi-weekly meetings moving forward scheduled with them, the next one being next week. We're working with them right now to develop minimum service standards. So what is that minimum service standard? And as mentioned on the prior slide, both the chiefs and county staff are trying to do best practice research to learn what others are doing. We've also formed an internal county staff stakeholder group to ensure that as we talk about the single fire tax district, that we do all the steps necessary to establish that tax district so you can fund it with the tax rate moving into FY27. So in terms of major timeline steps, we'll continue to spend the remainder of 2025, calendar year 2025, developing service standards with the fire chiefs. We're also working with them on trying to identify a funding formula to make sure that their levels of funding are predictable to them. To support them in budget development. The winter, we'll continue to finalize that work. In the early spring, we'll start doing some of the work necessary to build the tax rate. So you will be presented a finding report that's required by law, showing the justification and the need for that tax district. We'll have to send out a public notice to every property owner that's impacted by this. We'll have to do a public hearing. You all will have to adopt a resolution to form the district. And then as part of the FY27 budget, you will set the tax rate for that new district if you so choose to, and then you would zero out the current tax rates for the existing districts. And then we would move into 27 with that. With that, I am happy to take any questions.
Any questions for Raphael?
Yes, Raphael, thank you for this. And one of the things that I hear out in the community, I think there's some confusion. Can you go back one slide?
Of course.
The, around the funding, I think what people kind of heard in their minds when this started being talked about is they think of it as, okay, this, the flat tax, and they think that then, because a lot of the area I serve is part of the more rural area, right? And so you don't have as large a tax base. And so I think the perception is that that flat tax then is what they're going to get on that tax base, which would then reduce. Now, I know that's not what you're proposing, but I'm hoping you can just further elaborate, because that seems to be some of the misperception, is they think that their funding is actually going to decrease based on this.
Yeah, that's a really good question, Commissioner. So currently the way it works is, let's say someone lives in the Inca Candler District. There's a tax rate levied on Inca Candler District that generates X amount of revenue. That amount of revenue stays within the Inca Candler tax district, right? So for Inca Candler, their tax rate is 12 cents. So the 12 cents applied against their property value, that's the amount of money that's available for fire service in Inca Candler, right? For residents who live in Barnersville, they're paying a tax rate of 22 cents, and that 22 cents worth of revenue is staying in Barnersville. When you move to a single tax rate, you have one tax district that covers the whole unincorporated county, has one tax rate that generates that revenue, and then we are able to develop a funding formula to say how much of that money goes to X district, how much goes to this district, to create that equity or support among the things. So right now, in Barnersville, they're only generating revenue based off the properties in Barnersville. Whereas in Skyland, all that money just stays in Skyland. Now we're able to think about it from a county-wide system level perspective on the funding source.
And so the fire departments are working with you on this funding formula. So they're involved in that process of helping figure out what the funding formula.
They will be. So at this point, we've been focused our conversations with them on service standards. So we're trying to understand is what is the vision for what the fire service looks like in Buncombe County. Then we have that better sense. We can start working with them to understand what is that appropriate funding formula. So at this point, we have not done much work with the chiefs on the funding formula, but we will work with them.
It was important for us commissioners to not just go pick one of the different county models, but try to build Buncombe County model. And I also asked staff that we don't go to them with a funding formula in mind, but get them to help us to develop that. So yes, to your question, our job is for them to help us develop whatever situation, whatever model we choose for Buncombe County.
Okay, thank you.
But I want to make sure that the folks you're hearing from, that they recognize their revenue will not go down by the properties in their district. We know that Helene impacted our rural counties way more than it did some of our more urban. So when you think about Garden Creek, Barnersville, Fairview, some of those other counties, those parts of the county, we really need to make sure we're helping them to provide the same level of service that we are used to and we need.
So I greatly appreciate that we are looking to our fire chiefs to help us create this program. You know, they are very much in the driver's seat, helping us to kind of create something that works for them. I mean, currently the way it works, I've heard concerns that there will be one pot of money and then they're going to have to kind of come out begging for that and kind of fighting with each other over that single source of funding. So I think it's really important that our fire chiefs are helping create this formula, this funding formula, so that they understand that their needs will be met. Currently, the way it works is each district comes to us and they want an increase in their district. It's kind of case by case basis. So having levers to ensure that they are able to come to us, and even if it's a slightly different structure, they are able to have their needs met. I'm curious about the standard of coverage. Are we looking to create one document that's going to be a standard of coverage for the county? I know that The city has a standard of coverage, but that's a little bit easier. We've got much more varied terrain and difficulty getting around that terrain. So I'm curious how that standard of coverage conversation is coming along. And at the end of the day, you may live in the Reynolds district, but if I get in a wreck in the northern part of the county, I want to make sure that fire department that serves that northern part of the county, maybe Barnesville, for example, is just as well equipped to come and help me in a car wreck.
Exactly, and one of the things I see you flagging, Ryan or whoever's back there, but one of the things that came out of that salary study was also there's an urban standard and there's a very rural standard. And we need to make sure we're not messing that up. So yes, to your point, there's not just gonna be one standardized across the county. We know and recognize we have different terrains, we have different needs. But understanding what that minimum level that we need to have, to your point, if you get hurt in any part of the county, you wanna make sure when you call 911, you have a level and you know what to expect. And our responsibility by general statute is that we understand that. So not getting rid of, to Raphael's point, not getting rid of the other districts. We do need to make sure that from Upper Hominy to French Broad, all around our county, that those subject matter experts are still there, but that we equip them with what they need to respond.
I think as far as a standard of cover goes, that would, if the fire chiefs look at that, and that's one of the things that we want to provide, that as an opportunity for them to determine which area we're going to go in and how we're going to evaluate what the standards are going to be. Is that going to be NFPA standards through 1710, 1720? Is that going to be ISO standards? Is that going to be CIPC, Center for Public Safety Excellence, utilizing that for standards of cover in that area? Within those, as they make those choices of which one of those or parts of, could be parts of all of those, then that would be part of how that would be determined for what the standards would be within that. And then if we get to a point, and I think that would be down the road, that we would be doing a standard of cover, that would be by individual department, because every department is not the same, every community is not the same. And anytime if you're doing a standard of cover, the standard of cover is based off of the community and the risk within that community and how you're going to manage that risk. And so as we look at that, that really needs to be specifically done at the community level, just like we're looking at for community wildfire protection plans is at the community level and the district level.
And then the one other, to kind of get to our goals in all of this, the challenges that fire departments have in recruiting, retaining firefighters. Can y'all speak a little bit speak to how this change and how we tax moving to potentially one district will impact directly their staffing and their ability to maintain those firefighters? I know that some departments have folks on the state health and retirement packages, and some departments are kind of trying to make that happen on their own. But can you speak a little bit to how this may support their ability to recruit and retain?
Yeah, I think right now what we see is a model in which certain districts have a pretty low tax base. And even if we were to increase that tax rate, the amount of revenue generated does not necessarily meet those standards. By looking at the property tax rate base countywide, it allows us, as we create funding formulas and think about service standards, to generate a funding formula that allows our departments to have the funding necessary to do that work. There are some inequities. Some of these departments are municipal and they're able to provide into the Elders pension system. We have a couple of the nonprofits that have grandfathered access there. So we won't be able to solve all of this, but the goal is that it creates more financial sustainability and more predictability as well for our departments, so they can start moving the needle in addressing some of the challenges they've expressed over the years.
Thank you.
Other questions? All right, thank you, Raphael. Thank you. And Ryan, we appreciate it. All right, we're coming close to our designated ending time, and I'll let you grab the
That is
wrap
all
up.
we have for you today. Any last thoughts or questions before we adjourn?
Commissioners?
Just want to thank you all for this. This is the type of thing I keep on my desk and in my my bag, and if it's like an encyclopedia, I reference it pretty regularly. So
Yes,
thank you
he
for all the
does.
work that went into this great
Yes,
material
he does.
for everybody.
He comes back and says, on page 5 of this. Is there anything else you want to make sure we cover in our next session in January is targeted specifically to capital projects? But is there any topics you need for us to be thinking about that you want to hear more of as we go through budgets this year?
Well, I think the sooner, what I mentioned earlier around the bonds and all of that, because the sooner we can get information on that, because we'll have to be making decisions about if we want to move forward with that. And there's a whole process, as we know from previously, that we have to start. So I think sooner rather than later with that kind of information would be helpful. When is the next? January? Is that the next one?
January 22nd is our next meeting.
Tomorrow is the deadline for departments to send us capital requests and vehicle requests for the new budget year. And we'll be working through those requests and vetting what the outcome of those to make recommendations for this budget are.
Okay. So conversation on bonds. Anything else? From any of the commissioners? Anything from you, Parker?
And Martin.
And
he
Martin.
joined us as well.
No, that's it. Just the more information about bonds, especially in relation to the school bond question, which I don't think has ever been discussed in this county before. So I just want to make sure we are thorough about that.
Okay. Thank you.
I echo that, especially on the school bonds question, but thank you for a thoughtful presentation. This is great.
All right.
Thank
you all of our staff and commissioners for a great budget retreat. I think this is the earliest we've ever started, and I think that is fantastic for us as we move forward. We are officially adjourned.